Vote Rejoin EU.
Vote Rejoin EU.
I want you to focus on Brexit and why it is illegal. It is true that right from the outset, Brexit was brought in by an advisory referendum, and David Cameron made everybody believe that it could be magicked into law just because he said so on the leaflet. And that continued to go on even to today. But it was advisory, and the only reason that Brexit became law was because the Supreme Court ruling, which Gina Miller led, actually ended up giving the government an opportunity to create a three-line bill, which only asked for the permission of Parliament for the Prime Minister to notify a decision that to this day has not been made. And we know that it hasn't been made because we can feel the chaos of what Brexit has delivered. The reality is it's the same as a divorce. You have a decree nisi and then you have a decree absolute. We have done the decree absolute without doing the nisi. The nisi actually sorts out all of the detail about money, who has the kids, all of the structure. And had Parliament been forced to discuss what removing us from the single market would do, then immediately the country would have rebelled against Brexit. And that is why they needed to get it through without talking about it properly in Parliament. The other interesting fact about this is that it actually took 7 years to get the Hunting Act through, 7 years to remove the right to hunt foxes, and yet it took months to strip us of our rights in that notification bill. Even though that bill really today doesn't stand, it didn't make a decision. We thought that perhaps when Boris Johnson was elected with a large majority in 2019, that decision was made then, which would have satisfied Article 50, number 1. But I'm now increasingly of the view that that's not the case, because in EU law, you have to do everything in order. You can't do 3 before you do 1. And that is what we've done. We've done 2 before 1, and you can't undo that. If Boris Johnson wanted to make Brexit legal, he should have gone through and made a legal decision. But as I said, to make a legal decision would have meant Parliament publicly saying, well, this is what we're going to do to these people and it's bad. And it would have been entirely obvious and Brexit would have fallen apart at the seams. So that's where we are today. Brexit is still illegitimate. And now we have Keir Starmer in charge. We hoped he was going to be a good Prime Minister because he's a human rights lawyer. But unfortunately, Keir Starmer has embraced what I call the Enabling Act. And that's the act which the Tories brought in, which gives them sovereign powers to legislate in the engine room, effectively. And Keir Starmer, since he came into power, has embraced these powers, or his government have, whichever minister is doing this. And they have been deregulating chemical standards, food standards, animal welfare standards, and a lot of them. The Tories did a little bit, but Labour have really got into it big time. Not only that, Keir Starmer has signed a trade deal with Trump, and he has whacked it into law using this awful statutory instrument, Henry VIII powers. And that statutory instrument was laid down at the end of June. And it is law from the moment it's laid down. And we know that it's in force because this is why the bioethanol plants have closed, because contracts have been agreed on that basis, on the basis that they are opening the gates to American produce. And that produce is not up to standard. The bioethanol will have been produced with GM wheat, highly likely, and opening for quotas of beef. It's highly likely that some of it, possibly all of it, will have hormones in it because most of the American beef is reared with hormones. And that breaks our trade and cooperation agreement with Europe. And it also causes immense problems for Northern Ireland. George Monbiot has spoken about this. He's written an article in The Guardian just last month and pointed out how the chemical deregulation is a violation of the Good Friday Agreement and causes all sorts of problems. My goodness, how could we end up in this situation that Keir Starmer is a wannabe dictator? If he gets away with allowing this process in law, because we have an unwritten constitution, it means that he and whoever actually replaces him, potentially Nigel Farage, can start chipping away more and more and more at the rule of law using secret statutory instruments. And this is very frightening. But there is a case coming up in the ECHR, potentially. It has already made a decision on the papers, and now there is opportunity for an appeal. And that case is being brought by Caroline Lucas, Ben Bradshaw, who was a Labour MP, and also Alan Smith, who was an SNP MP. They've all stood down now. And so I watch with interest to see what happens with that case. But it is my view that if they are knocked back from that case, that there could be a possibility that we could gather as citizens and go back and create an argument to the Commission about why Brexit is illegal. And I think if enough of us will do that, and enough European citizens join us, then that really could be powerful. And I'm hoping that we can begin to build this movement and get this out in the public domain to really work as kryptonite against the flags that we're seeing everywhere, which are increasing in number and increasing the feeling of aggressive behaviour, aggressively fascist behaviour. So we do have to do a lot to try and save our country and our continent from the bad people who want to create chaos once again on the European continent. And it is true that if Britain falls into fascism and authoritarianism, it will be very hard to contain. There will be huge problems in Ireland, as everybody knows. Not only that, it spreads. And we're already seeing it spread from America to here. It creates a fashion as such. It sort of one enables the other. So it is only from citizens standing up to tyranny that we can ensure that the bad guys don't win.
Vote Rejoin EU. Join the EU vision.